folks. Ricky here, your creator and co-founder of the 98% podcast. And I'm here to take you through episode number 1 today. And we will be going through introductions, my story, and what this whole podcast is going to be about. The 98% podcast was created to help us connect with each other. So if you think about it, 98% of us are normal, right? There is 2% exceptional on either spectrum, good or bad. Now, I first heard this concept, which I thought was really fascinating. So I heard it in a book by Mark Manson. I can't remember which one, actually, off the top of my head, but I remember them talking about mass media exceptionalism, which I thought was really fascinating concept. So mass media exceptionalism. So with the concept of that, what we see on the day-to-day basis, whether it be in the news or social media, is actually part of like the 2% of what we actually see, right? So it's interesting, right? But what happens is we see it so frequently that it starts to become like that is the normal. So what that does in turn is it helps or it creates this division between us, thinking that one, we're not where we need to be, or we're not good enough, or things of that nature, or even on the flip side, or the world is a terrible place to live, right? And what we're doing is we're just seeing this stuff over and over and over, and our brain can't comprehend that this isn't normal society or what is going on. So the purpose of this podcast was really to create a place where I could have real conversations with real people and we could find a way to connect with each other, right? Rather than thinking that we're distant or separate or that we're not part of the group because of what we see and seeing that we're not aligned with it. Or even just thinking that, yeah, we're not good enough, right? Because we're seeing someone do this or someone do this or someone do this, right? These real extraordinary things, not knowing that that's actually very unusual, right? And there is power in normality, right? There's power knowing that, we are normal and that there is a way to connect with other people, right? So that is why I started this podcast. So what we're going to see as you go through is I'm going to go through people that I've met. So I've met quite a few people, throughout my life, and I think it's really fun to create a space for us to kind of have a conversation and share, just so you all can see what is normal, right? So what are people going through on a day-to-day basis, right? Whether it be something from like what was your childhood like, right? What was some of the struggles that you made for or that you came through, right? What's something that you're super grateful for? What are some things you've accomplished, right? What was the lowest time in your life and how did you make it through, right? So just having like some of these deep conversations where we can really learn a little bit about one another, right? I think it's really important for us to be able to connect in that space. And just share a little bit about me. I mean, I struggled with this for quite a while, actually, of just feeling so different or so separate, or even alone at times, right? For the fact that I just felt like I didn't really connect with people as much as I would like to, right? And a lot of it was that concept of just thinking that I'm going through things that are different than other people. So I think being able to create a platform, be able to have these conversations, is also healing for me. But I think there was so much strength in knowing that the terrible things that I've went through, other people have gone through it too, right? Thinking that no matter how good I am at something, there's always someone better, right? Or like, and just also in that humbling aspect, right? So I think it's really cool to just realize that, because right, if we can understand that we're normal and that all the stuff that's happened to us is just part of life essentially, then it's really a lot easier to go through and it helps us be able to connect with people better. So that's really kind of what it was for me. So what we do with the guest is we're going to have, like I said, a few set of questions, and I talked about those already. The first one, I'll go through the questions myself. So first being, how did you meet me, right? How do I know you, right? Because the first few people I'm going to bring on, like I said, most of them are going to be people I've met before, so that should create some general conversation. So, let's talk about that real quick. So I'll talk about how did I meet myself? This seems like a silly question, but I don't think it's a question we ask ourselves enough, right? So I'd say I've always been pretty individualistic, but that doesn't necessarily mean I knew myself, right? Like I knew my interests and what I was into. I was definitely not the person that follows the crowd necessarily, right? Like not into popular music, not into things like that. I kind of always found my own way, which was fun, but that doesn't necessarily mean I knew myself, right? So I'd say that journey really happened. I'd say it happened not that long ago. I'd say probably a good 5 or so years ago. and it started very gradually, right? So some of it was through work. Just to give you kind of a backstory there, I guess I can tell you what I've done. So born and raised, so I was born in Springfield, raised mostly in Lake of the Ozarks, Missouri. So lived there for most of my life, with my family. And my parents ran a construction business. They owned a gym. They did a few things like that. So obviously, I grew up working out, grew up kind of working construction and things of that nature. I kind of found interest in music kind of early on. So when I was in junior high, that's really when I discovered I mean, I always liked music, but I realized that I wanted to play music. So what's really funny though is my parents, right? They bought, my dad bought a guitar. I remember bringing a guitar home, like, hey, I'm gonna learn guitar. He didn't learn guitar, so it just kind of sat there. So I was like, well, I'm gonna learn. And it's funny because the motivation behind it, which is so funny to me, is like, I didn't learn guitar because I wanted to. I learned guitar because out of like a challenge. So I happened to go to this church at the time, and it was funny because they were everybody said they could play guitar, but rarely did anybody ever prove it. They were just like, yeah, yeah, I play guitar too. And I don't know, just one day it really bothered me. I don't know why. And I just thought, you know what, I'm gonna learn guitar just so I can actually know how to play. Like, it was out of that, which is what's funny. But that was the motivation I needed, just to grab it and practice. And I was self-taught in all my music, self-taught in most things. It's funny because I don't necessarily like being taught things. Don't get me wrong. So I love learning things. I love research, and that's what I do most of the time. But when it comes to music and stuff, like, I just like feeling it, like, and learning it. I didn't want to take any lessons and learn what someone else did or some of these songs that I wasn't into. I wanted to kind of learn myself. So self-taught. So thing about self-taught is you learn some really cool techniques because it's just you creating what works for you. The downside is it takes forever. So I think it was 2 years of playing nonstop before I even got any good at about anything guitar-wise. And that was a gradual process there. But I discovered music around that time and started with guitar. So guitar is what I started with, and then I sung a lot too. So I guess technically singing started first. But I listen to metal music, so that's what's fun. So a lot of people don't know that. Like, when I talk to people, they tend to say, like, they assume I do jazz, or I don't know what they think I'm into. But metal always seems to surprise people. But when I grew up, like, I used to listen to popular stuff when I was a kid. I think, as everybody did, Backstreet Boys, things of that nature. If that ages me at all, but I remember the first time I heard, I think it was Linkin Park's first album. Um, that was a big one, but also I think it was Mudvayne. So I had a buddy show me. I think it was one of the Mudvayne songs of LD50. If you know what I'm talking about, great. If you don't, that's totally understandable. But that was the first time I heard music that I was like, dude, this is sick. So that's when I first got on the kind of that metal kick. I loved the energy of it, loved the excitement. I loved how unique and different it was. So that's kind of where I navigated since. So junior high, I taught myself how to scream. So I know how to scream and do those, you say, death metal vocals or whatever. So that was kind of fun. So that's how I started. And then, and then I decided to learn guitar. And then, after learning guitar for quite a while, so I've been playing since junior high. Decided to play bass, started learning drums in high school, and I played lots of various instruments. I've been playing for a long time, but it was just because I wanted to learn. And I think at the core, what I really want is I didn't necessarily want to play guitar or sing necessarily. What I want to do is write music. So I wanted to create music from scratch. I'm a very creative type, do lots of creative things, whether it be creating board games, creating music, artwork, things of that nature. But music was really where I found that creative outlet. So I always wanted to learn everything. So I figured, well, if I can learn all the necessary instruments, then I can actually create music and stuff that I'm actually into, right? So there was a lot of bands I liked. So the music I made, I actually liked a lot, and I felt like it filled the gap for me, that the stuff that I wasn't hearing at the time. It was actually pretty cool. So started in junior high, played with a group of guys for quite some time. High school is really when we started playing a lot of originals and songs that I wrote that I really liked. We played at the junior, and senior year high school talent shows, played some original music, which was really fun. And ever since, it was a cool little experience. So we played for 8 years playing metal music. So the band name was Nightmare Nevermore. The whole concept behind that was not living this nightmare anymore. So like the concept of taking the negative and turning into a positive, or not living in a space of just negativity and darkness and stuff. Like, don't get me wrong, like it's an essential part of life. That's how we grow, is through pain and stuff. But the thought of not dwelling in it, or when that stuff comes, like how do we persevere? How are we resilient enough to make it through? And that was the whole concept of that band name. So, which, by the way, fun fact, we'll be releasing another album May 28th of 2024. Some more music, just kind of throwing it out there. So kind of I discovered my music, my creativity in that space. And then, when I got older, did a few different jobs, worked construction work for the most part, did gym stuff, worked as a server. I'd say if you all want to learn how to develop people skills, serving is one of those. And then I worked with Nike for 16 years. So, in training and development. So the first half of it was in the retail space. The last half was all in leadership development. So that's where I started doing a lot of research in psychology, neuroscience. I know that's not necessarily part of my job or my title, but that was very helpful for me to help others. I'm in that space, to be better leaders, to work better as a team. And I just got so much joy out of teaching and developing that. So that was kind of that space that I was in for a long time. So I love working with people, and I love creating solutions. Like I said, I love creativity. It doesn't have to be just music or art or anything like that. It can be the medium of like, how do I help people solve their problems, right? And this is podcast is an example of that, right? Of like some issue that I'm seeing, like with social media and news, and just us having so much technology all thrown at us all at one time, and forgetting what reality actually is, right? Like thinking that the exceptional is the norm or the standard, or thinking the world is a terrible place. When you think about it, the world is best place it's ever been. It's the best it's ever been if you think about it. I mean, think about the concept of we can get food. We're not starving, not in the US anyways, right? So like we have plenty of food to go around. We have anything we want, we can get delivered to us. Like everything is super easy these days. Yet why are we struggling with anxiety and things like that more and more? And right, and there's a lot of different concepts behind why. But I think social media and news and stuff like that, I think, is at the core. I don't think we were made to ingest that much information. And I think that's really important for us to, like I said, create a platform for us to be able to speak, communicate, and just realize that we are all going through similar stuff. This is the norm, not what we see every day, and to also build a sense of connection that we don't really get very often these days. And I think that's also part of the anxiety piece. We have less and less human interaction because things are so digital instead of face to face. So I'm an avid gym person. So I love to work out. I love to, and that's something I'm not necessarily recent, but I got back into it. So I kind of fell off of it for quite a few years, but got back into it over the last 3 years, practicing self-discipline and trying to create, okay, well, how do I get in better shape? And at first it was for mental clarity, emotional clarity. I did go through a divorce and separation around that time. So that's really what kind of helped motivate me to go to the gym. And then I just wanted to change a whole lot of practices, like take action, be self-disciplined, etc. And gym was part of that concept, right? So I committed to 5 days a week being in the gym. And over 3 years, I have only missed that one time. So that's pretty cool, right? And it started as self-discipline, I think is the purpose of it, right? So it started as self-discipline, then became habit. Now it doesn't feel like self-discipline. So it's just like I always tend to be at the gym, right? I think there's so much power in taking care of your body in that aspect too, of like not only does it help emotional, mental, but physical, right? Which I think's a huge thing, right? We keep getting older, we're not getting younger, right? And I think it's really important for us to keep ourselves in shape, right? So yeah, so love to work out at the gym. Like I said, I love music, all types of creativity, love leadership development. I'd say that's probably sums me up for the most part. Lots of unique, different interests. I have a YouTube channel that's around action figure photography and things of that nature, and just reviews. So I do little action figure stuff from time to time, so I put that there. Obviously, I like good movies, so I got Lord of the Rings there, so pretty good movie there. Love research, so I have 12 Rules for Life, Jordan Peterson's book there, which I think's a phenomenal book. Very good read, I'd say. Still my favorite book that I've discovered the last few years is actually Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. If you've not read that book, it's an easy read, and that was probably one of the best books that's helped me through tough times, because it helps us reframe what the tough times are, right? And what the obstacles are, right? So a lot of times we see them as issues or problems that we need to go around or that we need to avoid, when the concept is, what if that obstacle is the way, right? Like, what if that is how we get better, how we grow? What if that is part of the journey itself? And when you can reframe it that way, it makes you kind of think about the tough things in your life, like how they're put there to help challenge us and to help us grow. And I think that was such a cool concept. So that would definitely be a book recommendation. And I'll probably do more recommendations, maybe kind of go through books and things of that nature on this podcast as well. Maybe when I'm not interviewing people. Um, but let's see. So that would be the first question, right? So tell a little bit about yourself. Next, we'll probably talk about with the guest is, what was your childhood like, right? So we can talk about childhood, right? So when I was younger, I was very active. I loved anything to do with fighting. That was me when I was younger. So when it'd be Power Rangers, Ninja Turtles, anything like that. Like anytime I'd watch that, I'd be all over the floor doing karate kicks and all types of stuff. I was always a kid that was like, anytime I'd first meet a kid, like, hey, you want to wrestle? And we just wrestle. You know, fun times there. But loved that kind of growing up. Always had high energy, very athletic. So I did lots of sports kind of growing up. We felt really good though. So this is the thing too. So I know there's a lot of childhood trauma and things of that nature. And I wouldn't say I had any issues with that growing up, right? So when I think about my childhood, I felt always very safe. So I felt very safe growing up, which I know is better than what a lot of people can say. Um, did we connect emotionally? Not necessarily. And I think that's probably one of the big things is I learned as I grew up, especially over the last few years, that I had no emotional intelligence whatsoever. People thought I was always very stoic, right? I always saw the positive in everything, which is a good trait. But it also didn't help me realize what was going on emotionally. So I remember going to therapy for the first times to try it out and just thinking like, how are you feeling right now? And I was like, I don't know how to answer that question. Like, what emotions do you know? Sadness, anger, um, happy. Okay, any more? That's all I know, right? So I think that was a big thing for me, is just to kind of learn, one, what emotions are and how they kind of dictate our path and our journey through life, whether it be conscious or subconsciously, right? So I think if we can understand that, right, like how emotions dictate our path and understand them better, that's actually super helpful, right? It doesn't matter if we're sad regardless if we know how to identify it or not, right? We're anxious whether we know how to identify it or not. And I think that's the important part, is being able to identify it so then you can know what to do with that information, right? If I'm feeling anxious, then hit the mic. I know if I'm feeling anxious that I know what to do with it. Like, okay, so I'm feeling anxious. What do I need to do? How about I go on a walk, right, to get some mental clarity right now? That's good, right? Say I was anxious, but I didn't know I was anxious, right? I would probably be trying to work on this project or do something I'm trying to do and getting frustrated also, or, whatever, right? Maybe frustrated, but, without even knowing it, right? And then the project I'm working on might fall short. I might get frustrated in the process, and right, you don't go anywhere. So I think that that's really important to be able to identify it. So I'd say that was one thing that I didn't learn growing up. I know both my parents came from dysfunctional families, and they'll tell you that right away. But they did a great job. I feel like, all things considered, I felt very safe in my, growing up. I felt very taken care of, even though we didn't have a lot of money. For the most part, when I was younger, they owned a construction business, and I felt still very, very taken care of. I'd say the emotional thing was probably the big kicker and the biggest learning opportunity, kind of in my development. Now, that's my perspective. I do have a sister and a brother. We can bring them on, and they can share their perspective, because it might be different. Because, right, you can live in the same household. Our needs might be different. One's might get met, one's might not get met, right? So it might be completely different household compared to who you're talking to. Yeah, I remember, just grew up doing lots of sports. Loved doing that. That was probably one of my biggest things that I really enjoyed. And yeah, did track and field, did basketball for a bit, football a little bit as well, but track and field was definitely something I was into the most. I just love the challenge. And go figure, right? I'm talking about obstacles and overcoming these things. And my event that I love so much was hurdles, right? And I thought the concept of that race is amazing. So if you think about it, one, you have to be fast, but it's not necessarily about being fast, right? It's about being technical, like really understanding yourself, but also making sure that you're efficient and quick, right? For the reason that you have 10 hurdles to jump over, the slightest mistake could cost you the race, and it did frequently, right? For me, like most times, in my school, it was a 3A school, so not a big school. So most of the races I would win, but every year there'd be at least one or two that I would hit a hurdle or something would happen, and guess what? Lost. And I think that that's really important, and I think it's a really cool concept for life, that like it's about consistency and about really fine-tuning yourself. It's not always just about how fast you get there. It's about how do we technically work through these obstacles. And I think that's a really cool concept. So enjoyed that a lot. Like I said, did music, a lot of those things. What else? Yeah, I grew up in Lake the Ozarks. Moved to Branson for a bit, so lived in Branson for about 8 years. Fun place to visit, not a really cool place to live, but that's where I learned martial arts, and that's when I first started really working out hard. Was in Branson. It was right after school. I hit kind of a depressive mode for probably a year or so. We moved away from friends, and that was before I knew kind of what was going on, and I just realized I was very depressed. In hindsight, when I was there, I didn't think I was. But if you think about going to bed at like 3 or 4 in the morning, waking up at noon at the earliest, yeah, I'd say there's something there. I wrote a lot of good music though, which is kind of fun to think about. But yeah, lost a lot of weight. Yeah, I could tell I was depressed, and then one day I just decided to go to the gym and start working out and be consistent, because I was working out. Was I working out 3 days a week and I wasn't seeing results? And then one day I was just like, well, what if I was just consistent? What if I just did 5 days, but I was just there every day? And it's funny because I saw results actually a lot quicker that way. And I think we forget that it's about consistency at the end of the day. But but I did that. That's when I got introduced to martial arts. I started with boxing. Really enjoyed boxing a lot. Got taught by a semi-pro boxer who kind of took me through, a lot of the techniques and stuff. And I really appreciate, him doing that for me. I did kickboxing. Love kicking things. It was like my favorite. So did really enjoyed doing those kicks. So kickboxing was next. Then jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu was super fun. Talk about a workout, super good workout. And just submission game is just so great. And then learned a lot of just kind of random stuff. Did a few classes on Kaji Kembo or Kempo or things like that. Nothing too serious, but it was fun to just learn different things. So that's kind of where I kicked off that. And then that's actually when I started at Nike, was around that time. And it's funny because it was just a job, not a career. And saying that, I thought like a career, that's silly. So started off as a part-time employee, kind of, moved up to full-time, met a girl that I went to, that we went to church with as kids, and we ended up dating and getting married around that time. So being a full-time employee, I thought, hey, I can support us. And it's funny to think about. So lived in Branson at the time, and I made like $8.25 an hour full-time, so 40 hours a week, and I was supporting us. We lived in an apartment that was $350 or $400 a month, so it was super reasonable. It was sketchy, but I didn't feel unsafe there at all. But in hindsight, it's like, yeah, it probably wasn't the best place. They did do a drug bust. They had a drug bust there one day, which was pretty crazy to think about. But it was pretty sketchy. But yeah, so we lived off nothing, no money at all. So she was great about doing expenses and things of that nature. So she kept us on a budget. She was much better at that than I was. But yeah, we lived tight, but I never felt poor, right? So I felt like everything was taken care of. I had a good time. I had fun. But yeah, it was just interesting. So yeah, so got married. I was working there full time. Took a long time of, still doing music at the time, kind of traveling a little bit. We didn't go anywhere too far. We just kind of did most shows kind of in the Midwest area. Had a We had a daughter about 6 years into our marriage, and yeah, and that was when I decided to focus more on work. So I stepped into some leadership roles, and then those leadership roles kind of turned into me realizing that I love training people. That was something I was really into. I just enjoyed the amount of effort I'd put into research and getting information and giving people the right information to help, and giving it to them in a way that's very digestible. And I didn't realize that for a long time, but yeah, went there, and that's really when I'd say around that time was really when I started really doing a lot of development, kind of on myself. So um, yeah, it's really interesting. So, which kind of brings me to now, where I'm doing lots of research, looking at lots of podcasts, just taking in a lot of information. So I love to research. If you ever know me in real life, I have fun facts for about everything. Anything you want to say, I usually have some type of rebuttal or thing to go with it, like, oh, I've heard that, and like being able to share some facts. I just tend to remember things pretty well, which is really cool. And yeah, it's very interesting. So, right, so we talked about that one. So we did childhood. Um, let's see. Biggest struggle is something I might share. So for me, the biggest struggle I probably had was my divorce. It kind of came out of left field. I wasn't expecting, and I think that's what was so difficult, is I didn't see, I didn't see the relationship like degrading or anything. I actually thought it was going really well. Yeah, it wasn't, right? So it kind of took me through surprise, right? The moment I was told that it's time for a divorce, right? So I think that was the biggest struggle, and that's actually when I started doing the most development on myself, right? I didn't know what else to do, so I thought I didn't want to make any stupid decisions. So whether it be getting hooked on, uh, some type of substance or something like that to kind of help cope with the pain, or getting right into a relationship right after without healing. So I wanted to take time to really invest in myself, so I decided to do that. So I probably did it on a psychotic level, as far as pretty obsessive about like learning and stuff, but it was better than the alternative. So learned a lot of good information. I think that's when I started learning a lot about myself, whether it be emotionally or intellectually, but it also helped me really understand people, and really help with empathy, because I felt like that was one of the moments. I'm sure I went through tough things before, but that was one of the moments where I felt like I went through such a tough moment that I could finally connect with people emotionally that I felt like I couldn't connect with before. And it made every interaction that much better, right? That much deeper, which I always thought was really cool. So yeah, so I'd say that was the biggest struggle. But funny thing is if I think about it, I mean, it's been 3 years since, roughly, and I'm better for it, right? To a certain extent, like thinking about like the things that I've accomplished, things that I've grown through, the person I am now, I wouldn't trade for the person I was. And I think that's a really cool thing to think about. So I'd say that was probably the biggest struggle that I've been through. So cool. And then another question I might ask our guest is if they have a special talent or something that they can demonstrate for us. I've already said I play lots of instruments. So I do have, like I said, a new CD coming out May 28th. So if you want to check that out, you can go to Spotify. Maybe I'll drop the link down here beneath so you can access it. But yeah, I have tons of music on Spotify these days now. So you can kind of hear me singing, playing guitar, songs that I've written, which I think is kind of cool. So we'll save that for later. And then close off with people sharing about their business or anything that they want to share. So to kind of help market themselves. So, we can get them something out of it as well. So obviously I shared quite a bit with you. Hopefully it was helpful, but the goal is you're going to learn more and more as kind of we have these conversations too. So it's hard to recollect everything that kind of happened, in your life. And I'm doing this on the whim, by the way. So I'm just winging it, turned the camera on and just started talking. Yeah, so you'll learn more about me throughout the process. So really excited to kind of take you all through this journey, and I'm hoping you guys all I hope you get something out of it. So like, subscribe, right? The more we can grow this channel, the more I can do this without having to work in other jobs, because I would love to be able to do this podcast, do music and things like that for a living. That would be great. So the more you support those, this channel and stuff, the better. So I'll try to do these videos. I'm going to shoot for once a week. It might be once every 2 weeks to start. I'm just trying to see what I can juggle and what I can get going here, since we're just kind of kicking this off. I know it could take a few years to even have a podcast make any traction. So keep you updated, but we're going to do as best we can to be consistent. So again, appreciate it, and yeah, I'll catch you on the next one.